Hi, everyone. This week we're going to be talking about chapter 4 from the textbook. And so this is going to be an introduction to child abuse and neglect. I recognize the difficulty of this topic for every week, but I imagine this is very difficult for some people as well. So just keep that in mind that these next couple of weeks may be challenging, may be heavy. As always, please feel free to reach out if you ever need anything. So this chapter this week, we're going to be talking about the history of child abuse and neglect, particularly as it relates to modern day as well. We're going to identify and give some examples of the 4 primary categories of child maltreatment. And we're going to explain the demographics of child abuse victims and perpetrators. So looking at who is most at risk. So when we think about child abuse and neglect, rarely is it a single incident. It usually happens with a pattern over time. Children who receive no love, no care, no support often carry these scars into adulthood. It wasn't until the late 1970s and early 1980s that the criminal justice system intervened in crimes against children. Oftentimes it was viewed as a family problem, and it was behind closed doors. And so this reflected a greater social problem within our society, which was the devaluation of children, and then just the general lack of societal protections. Now, every state has legislation that prohibits crimes against children. Child Protective Services, CPS, generally refers to agencies that are authorized by law to act on behalf of a child when a parent is unwilling or unable to do so. And all states have laws that require certain professionals, such as teachers, police officers, social workers, daycare workers, to report when abuse is suspected. We're going to talk a little bit more about that at the end. Who is at risk? Children under the age of 1 are at the highest risk of death due to abuse and neglect. And if you think about that, children under 1 are at the highest risk primarily because they can't communicate, right? They can't communicate their needs, they can't communicate their wants, which is oftentimes very frustrating for parents. They also are not sleep or diaper trained. And so that often results in a lot of undue stress and frustration for parents when they are not sleep trained or diaper trained, potty trained. Department of Health and Human Services reports that a referral of abuse or neglect that is made to CPS is oftentimes either screened in or screened out. And so there's a whole, I won't get into the details right now, but CPS has a whole step-by-step process for how they screen calls and screen cases. As a result of an investigation by CPS, a child found to have been a victim of abuse or neglect results in the case being substantiated. Again, so when a call is made, it's either screened in or screened out, and then it's investigated further. A child is defined as a person under the age of 18, except in those states that specify a younger age. Infants and young children are the most frequent victims of neglect. The percentages of child victims are similar for both boys and girls, and victimization rates vary by race and ethnicity. So we see this across all socioeconomic backgrounds, all different race and ethnicity backgrounds as well. So the federal legislation defines a minimum definition for child abuse, and each state is responsible for refining those definitions further if they want to. But there's 2 different kind of pieces to a definition of child abuse. The first is an act of commission, which is a deliberate act overt act causing harm or threat of harm to a child. And then child neglect is an act of omission. And so this is the failure to provide for a child's basic physical, emotional, or educational needs. It also includes a failure to protect the child from harm or potential harm, regardless of the intended consequences. So again, each state varies. So that's part of some of the struggles that researchers have with it. There's mandatory reporting statutes that provide definition of child maltreatment. There's criminal statutes that define forms of child abuse and neglect that are criminally enforceable or criminally punishable. And then there's the juvenile court that has specific statutes as well that provide definitions necessary for the court to have jurisdiction over a child who has been abused. So if we think about child maltreatment, there is an endangerment standard as well that includes children who meet the harm standard, but adds others as well. So this counts children who are not yet harmed by abuse, or neglect if a CPS investigation has substantiated their maltreatment. So this, for example, is if there has been abuse or neglect of a 2-year-old child and maybe the mom is pregnant or just had a baby, and that baby has not directly been abused yet, but there is endangerment or concern or fear for that child to be harmed as well, but they have not yet been harmed. So the different types of child abuse, obviously, emotional, psychological abuse. Again, all states have different definitions of emotional, psychological abuse. It's typically defined as injury to the psychological capacity or emotional stability of the child. And so there's usually requires some evidence, either observed in their behavior, emotional response. And then it also includes witnessing family violence as considered a form of emotional or psychological abuse. So then we also have neglect. So neglect is frequently defined as the failure to provide. And so this can be anything: failure to provide food, clothing, shelter, medical needs, supervision, safety, if they're threatened at all. Neglect is one of the most common forms of abuse against children because it includes such a large range of different acts or lack of acts. There's 6 subcategories of neglect. So abandonment, educational neglect, emotional, psychological, medical, physical, or substance abuse. And we have physical abuse. And so this is what most think of immediately when you think of child abuse. This includes any non-accidental physical injury to the child, or any action that results in a physical impairment or death of the child. So it also includes any acts or circumstances that threaten the child with harm. So it could include things like human trafficking, involuntary servitude, trafficking of minors, all things like that. Fatalities, child fatalities in the United States is the death of a child by means other than natural causes. It's estimated that about 1,670 children die every year in the United States from abuse or neglect, typically at the hands of one or both parents. And again, children under the age of 1 are at the highest risk of death due to abuse and neglect. Finally, we have sexual abuse. Sexual abuse refers to sexual acts, sexually motivated behaviors involving children, or sexual exploitation of children. This includes a wide range of behaviors, and some states refer to sexual abuse in general terms, while other states specify very specific acts. Mandatory reporting. So this is the legal requirement that certain professionals must report cases of suspected abuse usually within a specific time period. So in the state of Texas, everyone is a mandatory reporter. It's not just a certain professional. Again, certain states sometimes deem certain professionals responsible. In the state of Texas, everyone is responsible. Everyone is a mandatory reporter of suspected child abuse. So you don't even have to investigate and find out whether there is actual child abuse. If you even suspect that there's child abuse going on, you are required by law to make a report and let CPS handle that. And they will then do their screening in and screening out process and determine whether to investigate or not. That is not, your job unless you specifically work for CPS. So again, one of the things that I typically recommend for all of my students is to have the CPS phone number in your phone, and to always be prepared, and ready to call in the event that you need to call. So the child abuse hotline is 1-800-252-5400. So again, the hotline number is 1-800-252-5400. So I have that saved in my phone. You can also make reports online as well. It's kind of a toss-up. I tell students that if the child is in immediate danger, call. If it's something that has happened, in the past, or something that you have found that they're in a safe environment currently, you could make a report online. I personally have found that online tends to maybe take even a little bit longer than on a phone call because they ask so many different details online as well. But it kind of is up to you. Again, if they are in immediate danger, absolutely call. So that's the website for it. If you guys have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to reach out. That's all for this week, and I hope you guys have a great week. Thank you so much.